Gambardella with the 10th thing I learned from Royce Gracie at the recent seminar in Dallas, Texas. And the 10th thing I learned is, you don't plan a fight, you win a fight. One of the students at the seminar asked Master Gracie what was his favorite technique to win a fight, and he replied, the one that wins the fight. And he went on to explain that he did not plan a fight. He did study film. He looked at it, and he studied and all that, and he did have specific moves for certain times during the thing that he intended to try at various times during the fight, but he did not make a plan of attack in his head and then try the moves and when they weren't working in the actual fight that he was in, when the conditions that would not allow them to work to never present themselves in a particular opponent he was trying to fight. I asked him, so how St. Pierre beat B.J. Penn last week, and he said that Pierre took B.J. out of his game plan. Every time B.J. tried a certain move, or expected to be able to try a certain move, or implement a plan of attack for a fight that he'd already had in his mind, George St. Pierre did something to take him out of his game plan and to nullify the response that B.J. intended to do. I remarked that I was surprised that B.J. Penn, who was so great on his back and on the ground, was in fact on his back and on the ground most of the entire fight, yet was beaten so badly by a man who in no way could be considered the same type of ground jiu-jitsu master that B.J. Penn was. And Master Gracie said that that was because every time B.J. Penn tried to do a move or a technique that he had planned, St. Pierre stopped it, countered it, and proceeded to beat B.J. to a pulp while he was doing it. Master Gracie went on to explain to a class, if you don't plan a fight, you plan to win a fight. You do practice and work on techniques that you might think would be good for a particular opponent, but when the actual fight starts and you have to use techniques that your opponent is giving you that you didn't plan, that are not predetermined in any way, even though you just do much better, even though your opponent is fully prepared for them and will stop them. Master Gracie said that you adapt the techniques you know to the particular fight and the fighter you were fighting. He modified, he trained, he traded, he always adapts during the actual fight. He went on to point out that most of the times in the real world, you don't have a video of your opponent's old fights. You don't have 6 months to get ready for the fight and 6 months to learn and practice techniques that you feel will help you beat that particular guy, that particular opponent. In a street fight, Master Gracie said that he'd been in hundreds, and only after a few seconds or a few minutes, he'd only have a few minutes or seconds to get ready for an actual fight. And he didn't have any time to prepare for the fight plan. And if you ever find yourself in a street fight, you won't have but a few seconds or a few minutes to get ready to have that fight. So you won't have a fight plan already made up in your mind for that particular fight. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm rambling here. Let me get right back to the specific point. What you do is go with the flow. Take what your opponent gives you and use the techniques that you know that will stop what your opponent is doing. Nullify his attack and allow you to control the fight. Control the events in the fight and you will win the fight. You might be a great kicker, but if you're on your back, you won't be able to do any kicks. You might be a great puncher and a hard jabber, but if you're held against the wall, you won't be able to jab or punch. You might be great on your back or on your right side, but your opponent might be holding you on your left side. You might have a great guard, but you find yourself in a mount. You might have some great chokes, but you find yourself being choked. So all your plans and all the techniques that you think you're good at or even great at might not be available for you to use because your opponent is not allowing you to do them. So that must mean you have to be able to change your techniques to techniques that are being allowed in the fight that will work against the person that you're actually fighting at a particular time during the fight. I can tell you from experience that you have to be prepared for anything. Master Guy Metzer is one of the greatest fighters to come out of Texas in the last 30 years and was a great UFC champion, pride champion in kickboxing, world champion, and even a wrestling champion. Master Metzer has some of the strongest and best kicking techniques in the world and uses vicious kicks to win many fights. But he can't kick But if he can't kick and he winds up on his back, he is also a great jiu-jitsu fighter and can beat you on his back. When I asked him about the techniques he used to defeat a certain opponent in a particular fight, he would go into great detail about what and how he did. And some of the fights he won with a side kick, some he won with a roundhouse kick, some he won with a right cross, some he won with a rear naked choke, some he won with a knee bar, some with an arm bar. The more we talked about the fights, the more in different ways he told me about the ways he won. He always adapted the techniques he used to that particular fight and changed whatever he needed to do to allow him to win that specific fight. He was constantly adapting and changing conditions in the fight and always changing his techniques so that he would use the right thing to win that particular fight. And you can and should do the same thing. You must learn to practice all aspects of your fight game. You must become a great puncher, a kicker, a thrower, a choker, a hold downer, a ground fighter, a wrist locks, joint locks, combinations, strength training, diet, mental, everything. You cannot just be a one-trick pony. You can't just be a good boxer and win all your fights with punching. You can't just be a good kicker and win all your fights with kicking. You can't just be a great ground fighter and win all your fights on the ground. You have to be good at everything. You have to train in all aspects of a fight. You have to know all the fight game and be prepared to make adaptations to any particular fight at any time during the fight. And you have to do it with ease and confidence. If you don't adapt and change as the fight progresses, you will just keep trying the same old punches, kicks, and takedowns as you did in the round one and use them in round two, and you probably won't make it to round three. You have to be prepared to change the way you are fighting and defending to what your opponent is allowing you to do. And when you learn that, when you have practiced enough to know what to do in any particular situation, you will become a great fighter and a great martial artist. That concludes our series on the 10 things I learned from the great Royce Gracie in Dallas, Texas.